Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. We're here for a city council meeting, and it is Monday, March 6th, 2023. We'll start the meeting with a roll call and determination of quorum. Oh, wait. I'm going to explain all the confusion here in a minute.
Okay. Nordstrom. Here. Solomon. Here. Roberts. Here. Stroman. Here. Armstrong. Here. Jones. Here. Lehman. Here. Ham. Here. Evans. Here. Roseland. Here. We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Before we move on, tonight we are test driving a new audio system here in the chambers. And it's not only an audio system, it's the system whereby the council members indicate their desire to speak, how they're called on, when their microphone becomes activated. And we've been thoroughly trained over the last couple minutes. So I would anticipate we're going to need some understanding and patience tonight as we figure out the glitches here, and I'm saying that mostly for the council members who are present. So, question for the audience: Did we previously arrange for any of you to do the invocation tonight? Okay. Well, let's go on with the meeting. Then we'll have a moment of silence and silent reflection, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. And another bit of information that's just been developing in the last few minutes is that the City of Rapid City administrative offices will have a 2-hour late start in the morning, anticipating 5 to 7 more inches of snow tonight, and already a determined 2-hour late school start. So we're going to follow suit under those circumstances. That'll be out on our social media and on our website, in case someone needs notified. Next on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Motion to approve by Jones and a second by Armstrong for adoption of the agenda. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. One final bit of information for the council members. The timer that we usually use up here is deactivated. So that means there's still time limits. I have a laptop right here that has your timer set up, and I'll be calling that and giving you the universal signal to start quieting down. So thank you for all of the for allowing me to anyway, item 1 on this agenda. You ready to get started? Item 1 on the agenda is to confirm the appointment of Daniel Ainsley as Director of the Rapid City Finance Department and authorize the Mayor and Interim Finance Director to sign the employment contract. Move to approve. Okay, we have a motion to approve Solomon, second by Lehman. All in favor of approval say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, item number 2 is the swearing in of Daniel Ainsley as the Director of the Rapid City Finance Department.
Everyone's leaving. Okay, I get it. solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of South Dakota against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or for the purpose of evasion, that I will faithfully and partially perform the duties of the Office of Finance Director within the Office of Finance, Rapid City, South Dakota, according to the law and to the best of my ability. So help me God. Thank you very much.
Going to go to Jason Solomon for a comment.
Thank you and welcome aboard, Mr. Ainsley. But I also wanted to give an appreciation to Tracy Davis for serving as interim finance director. You've done a great job, really helped keep the ship moving forward, and the council appreciates your efforts. Thank you.
Well said, and just so everyone knows, Mr. Ainsley will be starting April 10th, where on that day he'll get a tour of the building, and on April 11th he'll complete the city budget. So thanks to everyone. Okay, moving on with the agenda. We have a presentation on a community CNA training program by Stephanie Mayfield. You here, Stephanie? Okay.
Up here. There we go. All right. Good evening. My name is Stephanie Mayfield, and I'm the director of the West River Area Health Education Center, and I'm joined by...
Hi, I'm Shannon Waldner. I'm the Senior Director of Professional Practice and Development at Monument Health.
And you may have remembered, I did stop by last year to talk about our Department of Labor grant that we received for 4 years. We're halfway through the grant, and up on the screen are our partners within the grant so that we can cover the entire state. Let's see. This one?
Is it this one? There we go.
There. All right, and so here it just talks about the period of performance and the grant, and really must have to push it. There we go. We just completed a heat map that actually shows the reach that this grant has had in 2 years across the state of South Dakota. And so we have the nursing program out here in western South Dakota. There's an EMT and paramedic apprenticeship program on the east side of the state. And then across the whole state, we've been bringing a behavioral health conference that's continuing ed for professionals called Mission Possible, and that will be coming up at the end of May this year. And then we also hold a Rural Health Equity Summit in the fall, where we gather administrators from critical access hospitals across the state, and we talk about the issues affecting rural health care delivery. And then for our initiative in particular, you need to be 18 years or older, unemployed, underemployed, or an incumbent worker looking to upskill. And we're working on nursing assistants, licensed practical nurses, and then registered nurses, either the ADN or the BSN program. So far, you see we only funded 2 CNAs, and we'll get to that here in just a second. But we had funding for 105 total to provide for Western South Dakota. Licensed practical nurses, we've already funded 24 in our community, and 32 we have left to fund. So we pay 50% of the tuition for an LPN at WDT for their education, and we also offer a $1,000 stipend. So it's really a great time if you've ever thought about going into nursing, because you can get half of it paid for through this grant. And then also WDT has a ADN program for registered nurses, and we've only funded 3 thus far, and with remaining of 13 people that we can fund. And then we actually used all our funding for the BSN program at SDSU College of Nursing here in Rapid City. So we have 17 right now that are in the current program to get their bachelor's in nursing. And then finally, we're also trying to help with pre-nursing pipeline. So that's the applied health science degree. And we've funded 10, and we have 6 left to fund, hopefully in the fall. So the certified nursing assistants, our initial goal that we wrote into our grant was to train 105 in 4 years. However, the 2 existing programs ended last spring. And so there was no public-facing certified nursing assistant training available anywhere in Western South Dakota. And so we needed to find a solution. And so I gave my report to my board of directors, and Emily Leach from Monument is one of my board members, and she goes, you know, I kind of think that we've been talking a lot about that at Monument, creating a community program. And so she linked me with Shannon, and we actually ended up the next week at the air show and in the STEM displays right across from one another, so we could start talking about it. And so we actually, it's really exciting because the first class starts tomorrow, weather pending. Okay, whoops, just us. Okay. So how are we getting the word out? Obviously, we're hoping that all of you can spread the word, but we do have digital billboards going around town with our advertisement for CNAs. We also have an ad for the next year in Elevates magazine monthly, and also the Rapid City Journal. We're doing ads on Wednesdays and Saturdays for the next 2 months. And then we've done flyers, and last week we were at the Black Hills Career Fair, and we already had someone from the fair apply over the weekend. And we do have, I'll leave a few here on the table, the flyers about the CNA program and how to get on line to apply. There we go. And so after the people get accepted into the program, they do have to go through a background check and drug screen, as well as immunizations, and then we turn them over to Monument. Yes.
So we started this process of looking into a community CNA program right after COVID. We were running an internal CNA program for our long-term cares. And when COVID came, our team, I have about 10 team members, registered nurses who do training, and our team realized that we really needed to do more hands-on with people, and we were taking community members and people within Monument who'd never done nursing care and teaching them how to become nurses' aides at the bedside, because we knew we were preparing for some kind of a surge coming. So at that point, Monument invested in this training center that we have out at the Turbine Building off of Elkvale here. And we decided at that point, we really needed to look into doing something for the community, because we were starting to get requests, can you train people? And I didn't realize that there wasn't other training programs out here, and that's probably why the request started. So my in-laws lived at a assisted living, and they were approaching me saying, hey, I heard you have connections at Monument, can you help us? So we just decided in earnest in probably the last year, to investigate what it would take to open a certified training center. Applied with Department of Health and the Board of Nursing, received that approval, and then weirdly, I met Stephanie at the air show. So we are forging ahead with this, and then through the AHEC grant, and we're going to continue this community CNA program. There are modules that they complete. It's about 50 to 51 hours of modules, informational didactic material. There's 16 hours of clinical experience, which we partner them with our own CNAs at Monument. There's no employment contract or any obligation to Monument. It's just we want there to be enough caregivers in our community, and it also builds a pipeline so that people can decide if they're interested in healthcare, and if they are, then we can help maybe bridge that through Black Hills State or one of the local colleges. So no obligation. Of course, we're definitely going to recruit. If they want a job, we have one for them. So they do their 16 hours of clinical on the floor with a CNA and a nurse. And then we test them at our center. We also have a skills lab so that we get them ready for that testing and make them successful. So really excited about this program, and hope that, even if folks aren't going to go into nursing, there's other healthcare fields that really need help throughout our community. That's generally part of the problem when we're trying to transfer people out into the community. Sometimes it's a staffing issue, so we recognize that, and we want to try and help our community in that way. So that's what I have.
And then just one follow-up. So for the CNA program, it's actually, for the first 103 students, it's completely free. So our grant will pay 100% of the tuition, pays for the background checks, immunization, record keeping, all of that, scrubs, and plus they get a little bit more through a stipend to buy maybe a laptop that they want to use for the schooling. And so nothing out of pocket. And we invite everyone who's interested and has a passion for caregiving to apply. Thank you.
All right, thank you. It's good information. Looks like we have a couple of comments or questions. First, we'll go to Pat Jones.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Stephanie, good evening. Nice to see you again. If I recall from when you and I spoke about this last, did you tell me that there's no state funding for this program? It's all just the Department of Labor grants from the federal government, correct? Correct.
It's a Department of Labor federal grant we received.
And have you pursued money from the state of South Dakota to help pay for this?
Not yet, but interesting you bring that up, because on Thursday, the last day of session, the West River AHEC is hosting a legislative lunch and learn in the rotunda, and we're bringing our 14-foot inflatable brain. So hopefully the weather permits us to get there. But yeah, so that will be our first discussions with the government, South Dakota government.
So you'll be taking the airhead along with you to share with our legislators.
Yes.
Begs for comment, but I'll pass. So this is a fantastic program. There's such a need for CNAs and others, and I was excited to visit with you about it over a baked potato at your open house, and really wish you the best, and really appreciate Monument being involved with it as well, because as our community leader in healthcare and hospitalization, your involvement is critical. So thank you so much, and good luck getting more funding for it. I think the state should be involved in it. Healthcare is vital all across our state. There's more shortages than overages in healthcare, so I hope you can be successful in getting that spread. But thank you for your work so far. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, next we have Laura Armstrong.
Just wanted to thank you for coming back and following up from your initial presentation, and I just wanted to share that Emily Leach was a speech pathology student of mine, and it is just wonderful to see her blossom and grow. I think after speech pathology, she went through the EPIC training and worked her way up, and now she's a director of labs. Mm-hmm. That is phenomenal, and programs like these just open the doors. It's just amazing how you can pivot through the healthcare field, and you think you're going to go one way, and then it opens up to another opportunity, and it helps not only us grow professionally, but it also helps our community grow. So thank you for offering this program. Please say hello to Emily for me, and please continue to grow the wonderful people here. Thank you.
All right, thank you both. Appreciate the presentation. Now, next on the agenda is the general public comment. We have one general public comment speaker tonight, and that is Ron Sasso. All the speakers tonight, everyone here for the resolution, this will be a little bit later down in the agenda. All the speakers tonight here have 3 minutes, and we still have the old-fashioned timer over here, so we know that's going to work.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I just wanted to touch base, I guess, on elections. A few things. One, I was looking at the city's website, and I think does need some updates on the election page. And for transparency purposes, too, one of the things I know way back in the dark ages when I was on council, we had statements of financial interest available online, and I think that's something that probably should be available again. The other thing, Mayor, that your page doesn't say when your term ends, and I think nobody will know. Okay, obviously kidding there. But that brings me to my real concern, though, even though it should say that, but my real concern here is the way the ordinance was changed, that now for mayor, there's no runoff. And as one of the few people who has endured 2 runoffs unsuccessfully, I have to say, I don't recommend them for anyone. They're not fun, particularly if you lose. But I believe, though, for mayor, I think this is something where you might want to consider making an ordinance change to this, because realistically, you can have somebody get elected with less than 30% because you've got a big field already. So that's just what I really wanted to emphasize, because I think where the city is, it's very important. And again, I wouldn't want anybody to have to endure a runoff, and I think having the previous ordinance the way it was, if anybody gets over 50%, you're good. And if it's below that, going to the top 2 for the runoff, I think makes sense for the mayor's race. I'm not saying for council, but for the mayor's race, I think it absolutely makes sense, because the amount of time involved, I mean, the amount of importance on that, whereas with council, you've got 10 seats, and 1 member, it's not as critical as it is for the mayor. I mean, the mayor's the CEO. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents, and wish you all the best. Thanks.
All right, thank you. And that's all we have for general public comment. We'll go on to non-public hearing items 4 through 40, and we'll open public comment on items 4 through 38, although there are no speaker requests for those items either. So we'll close the public comment and go on to consent items 4 through 38. Would the council have any items they wish to pull from consent? We'll go to Lance Lehman.
Thank you, Mayor. Item 26.
Okay, any other items council would like to pull off consent? If not, I would entertain a motion to. Okay, we have a motion to approve the remainder by Bill Evans and a second by someone, Jason. All right, so all in favor of approving consent with the exception of 26, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Now on to item 26. Approve request from KLJ Engineering on behalf of owner NDN Holdings for a variance to waive the requirement to install sidewalk along Country Road and deny variance to waive requirement to install sidewalk along Haynes Avenue per city ordinance 12.08.060. Lance Lehman.
Thank you, Mayor. At the request of the applicant, I'd like to make a motion to move this to the next city council meeting.
Okay, second by Pat Jones. Seeing no further requests to speak, all in favor of moving item 26 to the next regularly scheduled council meeting, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, that takes us through the consent calendar. Now on to non-consent items 39 and 40. We have some speaker request forms on item number 40. I'll call your name. You can approach the podium. You'll have 3 minutes to make your statement and then turn it over to the next person. So first speaker up in the public comment period is Natalie Johnson.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Natalie Johnson. I'm here representing the U City Council, and I wanted to talk about item 40, the social service standards opposition that is being proposed. So this is actually a large topic of discussion at our last U City Council meeting, and many people on the council showed a lot of support or excitement to talk about opposing these social studies standards. Unfortunately, we kind of realized towards the end of that discussion that there was a lot of time constraints, that we wouldn't be able to get anything together as a council in time to really do anything about it as an entire group, but we were encouraged to go and do things individually. I also wanted to thank you for not necessarily just opposing, but also just caring about this youth issue, since it doesn't necessarily directly affect anyone on city council, seeing as how I'm assuming none of you are currently in a public school system. But moving on to what the actual social studies requirements are, I did note that the agenda recommended approving the opposition to it, which I absolutely agree with. And though it's unsure if this will actually really do anything to change whether or not it'll get passed, I think it's still important to try regardless. And then me personally, what I'm about to say is not on behalf of U City Council. These are my own personal opinions, and I just want to make it clear these don't reflect U City Council's opinions as a whole. But I personally think that some of the problems with the standards are that there's not enough mention of Native American history, at all within the standards. And also, and this is a topic of debate at our last U City Council meeting, because I brought up the point that there is a large emphasis on Christianity in terms of history, which is important to note because it is a large part of history. But I personally was worried about any sort of bias towards Christianity, especially with a lot of religious field legislation that's being passed throughout the entire nation, and also the lack of teachers that was on the selection board. So that was a topic of debate at our U City Council meeting, and that's my personal opinion. That's not representing U City Council. I think it also expects too much of the students, as a lot of them don't have quite the cognitive function to fully understand the concepts that are being taught to them, because I don't even understand everything with Roman history, and I don't expect a first grader to either. So I just wanted to once again repeat my support for the opposition and thanking you for your consideration tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next speaker is Garrett Pfeiffer.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I won't repeat myself fully from last week. I apologize to those of you who had to listen to me once. I would again just reiterate, I think the only opinion that really matters on these standards is that of the teachers who have to implement them. And the ones I've talked to directly or indirectly through going to Board of Education meetings and hearing about the emails the board is receiving, overwhelmingly the opinion is that they're not feasible, prudent, appropriate, whatever. And for a tour de force on that, I'd refer you to Pat Jones. But I think my point tonight is whether you guys have any teeth on this or not, I don't think it matters so much. And even if it doesn't go anywhere this evening, I appreciate that you have it in front of you, because I think, you know, I happily send my daughters to Meadowbrook, but if their teacher is ill or gone for any reason, it's not uncommon that they just don't have a teacher that day. And I think we're at a critically important point in our school system in terms of teacher number, teacher retention. I know qualified young professionals who are walking away already. And I think, as Malcolm Gladwell would say, we're approaching a tipping point in terms of losing even more and not being able to sustain a school system, which obviously affects our community. And so while the state might not reciprocate the notion that we are listening, and you guys are listening just by having this out here tonight to the teachers, I think it is important that locally we do, and that you make a statement, and that you at least have this discussion, because on April 17th, if this gets pushed forward, what happens here tonight doesn't matter either way. But I think it does matter in that that day, the teachers here know that we support them and that we hear them. And so I understand and respect the opinion that maybe this isn't a city council matter, and if that's where it goes, that's fine. But I really do think it matters in terms of knowing that they're heard, so that we're not adding to the opportunity or the mentality that, you know, what's the point of being here? And so thank you for your time and consideration in that, and considering it from my selfish perspective of, you know, wanting my kids to enter a school system with qualified teachers who are there because they care. I appreciate that you took that into consideration, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up is Annie Bashand.
Good evening, Mayor Allender and members of the Rapid City Common Council. I rise today as the chair of the Pennington County Democrats to speak in favor of a strong and accurate education for our future generations, and therefore speak in support of the resolution to oppose the South Dakota's proposed social studies standards. First, let us be clear. The proposed standards are not standards. Instead, it is a proposed curriculum that relies heavily on rote learning. Rote learning, as we know, is the learning by memorization rather than thinking and reasoning. The power of curiosity is essential to the development of critical thinking skills that are foundation to a well-rounded individual. The proposed standards fail to embrace a student's potential and expand their opportunities. It is well established that rote learning isn't the most effective learning process unless your intention is for indoctrination. Students lose the ability to think for themselves because they are accustomed to following instructions. They are limited in their ability to build leadership skills. Rote memorization does not promote critical thinking. It makes people followers and not leaders, and doesn't promote deeper understanding, and most importantly, it doesn't challenge the brain. Rote learning does not allow for complex connections between previous and new knowledge. These complex connections develop an individual's ability for discernment, which is critical to the ability to make healthy, well-informed decisions. We support healthy brains, inquisitive brains, students who develop the ability to reason, explore, and question, and most importantly, live up to their potential. That potential includes using robust knowledge of the history and culture of the area in which you live, and even a broader knowledge of the history and cultures of the United States in order to develop an ability to help solve the social problems of the day. Finally, some have questioned why it is important that the City of Rapid City pass a resolution regarding the education standards. We, the citizens of this community, have elected you to be the voice of the people in this community, and our voices have loudly identified we are fully in opposition to the proposed social studies standards. We urge you to join us and school boards throughout the state in opposing these misguided changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, next up is Donna Robinson.
Hi, I'm here also as a citizen and as a former educator of many, many years, family that's in education, and even a son that still is currently teaching. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for bringing this forward. I think it shows an awareness and an appreciation that many facets of the city have to grow and work together to grow the sum total. I find it very encouraging, and I want to encourage you to support the opposition to the social studies standards. I think many of you have become aware of the broad spread dissatisfaction of the standards and the reasons why, and I really appreciate your due diligence on that matter. But more importantly, today I'm going to speak about why is it appropriate for you to take this stance. I think it's entirely appropriate to speak upon the matter that affects the city so profoundly. Education is an integral part of the quality of a Rapid City citizen's daily life. The quality of the school system affects the workforce and the growth of the economy. Many companies are striving to grow their business and recruit high-quality employees. These efforts would be hindered by a damaged school system. It would directly affect the decision of many to move here or not. Current residents, and certainly many teachers, will decide reluctantly to remove themselves from Rapid City. And the business community through Elevate and the local school board have both come out in opposition of these standards. So you would not be alone. You will be supporting highly regarded other agencies. Furthermore, the city and the news has mentioned the concern about safety and crime. It is well documented that a lack of a healthy education system is directly related to the growth of crime and violence. With another colleague, we were holding community awareness programs last year down at the library, and I don't know his exact designation, but Officer Doyle came and spoke very eloquently about the link between education and crime. The ripple effect of the damage, this statewide infiltration of our school system would be drastic. You owe it to the citizens, the business committee, and the school system to stand by them and to support them in opposition to the imposition of these standards. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, Sean Nielsen.
Thank you, council members, very much for considering a resolution to oppose these proposed social studies standards. I'm a middle school social studies teacher here in town that served on the 2021 work group and the 2022 Governor's Revision Commission. By the way, I was the only social studies teacher on this commission in 2022. How can one teacher be enough for the entire state? I stand before you in opposition to these standards. Although proponents repeatedly state these are currently being used across the country, they are not being used in public school classrooms. Public schools have far different challenges than private or charter schools. I have high expectations, like many teachers of my students, and I teach with rigor, challenging relevance, and I guide my students in critical thinking. I expect them to be independent thinkers after considering all sides. If these standards are adopted, critical thinking would erode, and I will no longer have the time to guide the students in this important exercise. Yes, students do need to know some foundational knowledge first. However, memorization should not be the only tool. I'm sure you've all heard of the concerns from educators regarding the lack of critical thinking, the exhaustive list of content, and how they would be developmentally inappropriate. This truly is a community concern. I am very worried personally about what this would do to the teacher shortage that we're already experiencing here in Rapid City. It just isn't the right plan for our students. I challenge anyone to review the current standards and then compare them with the proposal. Consider whether your child or grandchild can achieve success with these proposed standards. Although this body, we know, is not the final decision maker, passing this resolution sends the message that you are listening and are aware of how this will negatively impact our community. 1,094 comments have been submitted. Of those 1,094, 940 are in opposition to these proposed standards. That's 85%. As I told the members of the Board of Education Standards at the February 10th hearing, the people have spoken, and there is no question about the direction that they wish to take. I challenge them to cast a vote to reflect the will of the people. Public discourse continues, and I am hopeful in the end that common sense will prevail. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your service to our community.
Thank you. Next speaker is Sarah Gross.
Hello, Board. My name is Sarah Gross, and I've been teaching for 17 years. I'm nationally board certified, and I recently got my doctorate in education. And I've talked to some of you about these standards dating way back to September and October. And I'm not a social studies teacher. My greatest fear is twofold. Number one, that my first grader and my third grader that are being babysat by a phone in the hallway, that they have inappropriate expectations. I think the Magna Carta is something in the first grade standards, and my little boy, we are working on days of the week, and we are working on months and time, and then we're also working on place. And so we're like, Rapid City, and he's like, yeah, we live in Colorado, and I'm like, well, so I mean, he's brilliant and he's wonderful, and I know that kids can do hard things, but I don't think we should ask them to do inappropriate things. And then my second greatest fear is that my wonderfully talented colleagues like Sean Nielsen will leave teaching, because in South Dakota we know that we are underfunding education, with average teacher salary being number 49 in the nation, but this undermines educator voice. And I think last year I counted 8 of my teaching colleagues that left. Rapid City doesn't have a teacher shortage, guys. We have a lack of people who are willing to work in education in Rapid City. And so I really think that it might not be your realm, but if we're not being heard in other places, we need help. And so the parents and educators have just asked that we throw, I think Garrett spoke earlier, I was listening in, and just really said, we show support for our teachers in Rapid City, and our school board did that unanimously, but proponents have said, ignore those school districts. There's 22 of them, but don't look at those resolutions. They've been coerced. And I don't believe that I'm coercing, but I've looked really deeply into each of those standards and said to myself, this is unreasonable. And so I appreciate your time so much. I appreciate every conversation I've had, and I hope that we can throw support towards South Dakota kids and teachers and schools and make our system even stronger. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Kyle Kraus.
Thank you very much. My name's Kyle Kraus. I'm a community member and parent of a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old. Given much the same speech I gave last week, but I'm telling you, you guys spend a lot of money on economic development. You've got new civic center, over $100 million. You got 20 tax increment finance districts in town. You got the David Lust Accelerator building, the airport. You give money to Elevate, to wine and dine businesses. A lot of you attend forums on economic growth. really that economic development piece is a huge part of your job. And what I can tell you is that if our schools are in crisis, all those hundreds of millions of dollars you're spending will be for naught, because businesses aren't going to want to come here when they can't attract top-level talent. And top-level talent does not want to come here and does not want to stay here if if they have to send their kids to schools where they don't have enough teachers. I'd say in the context of all of that, really this resolution's something easy. You don't have to spend any money. You just have to lend your voices. Lend them to support the 300 or so local teachers, which is a huge portion of our local school district. I know there would have been more if there weren't issues circulating the form that they were signing that put their name in the Rapid City Journal to publicly say, this is bad for our kids. Don't support these. Our local school board passed a resolution unanimously against this. Our biggest economic development corporation, Elevate, says this is bad for business. Don't do this. And I'd also just suggest there's a whole lot of parents out there that are going, whoa, wait a second. Like I said, I've got a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old. I talk to my kids' teachers. They say, there's no way we can teach to these standards without cutting back on important things your kids are learning. Right now, what they learn, my kid's in 1st grade, he's learning reading, writing, and basic math. Stuff in these standards, which I've read, by the way, for early elementary, way beyond age appropriate for kids his age. We're talking ancient Roman history and studying the Greek gods and all sorts of just stuff that basic common sense tells anyone who looks at them just doesn't make sense for these kids. The reason that stuff is in there, we didn't have any elementary school teachers on the committee that helped put these together. There was one. So I guess I'd strongly encourage you to pass this resolution and lend your voices to our teachers and community members who oppose these.
Okay, thank you. And that'll close our public comment period on these items. We'll start back on the agenda under ordinances with item 39. Second reading of ordinance 6563 regarding supplemental appropriation number 1 for 2023. Motion to approve Nordstrom, second Jones. Okay, all in favor of approval, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Under council items and liaison reports, we have item number 40, approve resolution number 2023-021, a resolution expressing opposition to the adoption of proposed social studies content standards currently under consideration by the South Dakota Board of Education Standards. And we will go to Pat Jones in 1 second. There you go.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move approval of item 40, the resolution expressing opposition to the adoption of the proposed social studies standards, and keep the floor if I can get a second, please.
Second by Armstrong. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. At last week's Legal and Finance Committee meeting, I spoke, the paper said passionately for 10 minutes on my feelings about this, and I won't go over all of those things again, except to say that these standards, and they're not really standards, actually. They are, and I believe it was Annie who said they were more like a doctrine, and that's what they are. It's a proposed doctrine that removes critical thinking and exploration from teaching, from the standards themselves. My goodness, to hear Mr. Nielsen say that he was the only teacher on the review committee, I asked Mr. Evans, I said, hold me back, because this is just infuriating. It's just another example of how wrong that process was. The process was disrespectful to our kids, to our parents, to teachers, and to the process itself. Curriculum development from a K-12 standpoint, no matter what the subject area, is local groups, students, parents, administrators, looking at a concept and saying, what do we want our kids to know from kindergarten and when they graduate? What matters most to our community? What do our trained educators believe should be taught? And at what level? It's a horizontal plane of K-12. It's a vertical intersection of each grade level as to where each concept should be. And it takes work, it takes training, it takes research, but when done right and done well, it's a wonderful process where our kids win and our teachers are free to teach. This process some of it was done in the dark. Meetings were held on days to make it more difficult for teachers and parents to attend. So many things done wrong. Being against these standards is fully supported by our local school board. That's interesting in its own right that they were all able to come together and agree on this. We are taxing entities in our community, the two largest taxing entities. They have their role and we have ours, and rarely do they come together. But at a moment like this, when something that's going to impact so many people of our community, kids, parents, grandparents, teachers, aunts, uncles, everyone who cares about the success of kids, when those things are on the table, it takes a village to raise a child, right? It's times like this where we all have to come together and say that this is wrong, and let the people who we represent know that we're listening. I was told, well, why are you sticking your nose into this? You know, you shouldn't be sticking your nose into it. Well, Pat Jones, the guy, has been against these for months, and I've been following it closely. Pat Jones, the council member, kept getting contacted by people about it, sharing their opinion. I was asked to bring this resolution forward. I read it. I was very happy to bring it forward. I appreciate the people who put it together, and I was very happy to bring it forward on behalf of them. Because I believe strongly that we need to make a firm message and be sure that there's no confusion as to what the people of Rapid City have to say about this. And even if you don't care about education, we as a city council are challenged and charged to look at infrastructure. It's one of the most important things that we do. Roads, parks, public safety, schools. When we talk about businesses and others coming to Rapid City, one of the things that always comes up is the quality of our schools. That will bring people. We have the School of Mines here, one of the best universities in the world, right here in our backyard. We need a public school system that is right along in line with that. This proposed doctrination of just facts and you will learn this and you will learn that dissolves all of that. Rote learning, memorization, obvious bias in the content is not what we need to encourage our kids to grow and become the best they can be. And many of you said a lot of these same things, and you said it better than I can. But it's very important that I share these as well. We are listening. And I encourage my fellow council members to realize that, yeah, even though it's just a resolution and it doesn't have any teeth, it's important for us to tell our constituents and our community, we're listening, we care about you, and this is one thing we can do to show that. Please vote in support of the resolution against the proposed social studies standards. Thank you.
Okay, next up we have Bill Evans.
There. Trust me, Mr. Jones, it's probably not easy to say it better than you just did. You know, I taught for 40 years as well, and a lot of people have said it's out of our purview, it's not within our purview to be expressing an opinion on this, but the reality is there is a city organism that we're part of and the school is a part of, and we affect each other in our decisions. And I've been pushing strongly to have the school, for instance, retain neighborhood schools, because I believe it really affects the city neighborhoods and the way the children grow up, feeling ownership in their community. So I do believe it maybe is within our purview. But I really started changing my mind on whether or not I should have an opinion. And it's when I went to a funeral today and recited the rosary. Now, I've been learning to do that since I was 3 years old. And I suddenly realized what a kind of a mindless recitation that I didn't even understand I was saying coming out of my mouth. And that's what happens when you teach children at an early age. It becomes ingrained in you. You don't necessarily understand what you're doing. You can just do it. Annie so eloquently talked about rote learning, and trust me, we use rote learning in the school district. That was the success of my orchestra program. When you used to see those 2-year-olds on Johnny Carson back in the 60s coming from Japan playing those violin concertos that usually only doctoral students in this country played, well, they do that in Rapid City now because we copied the Suzuki mother tongue teaching, which starts teaching children rote learning at an early age, so they play everything in tune, their fingers, it's a second language. And then when they start reading words, we teach them how to read notes. There's a time and a place for everything in child development and in education. And this is a case where it's completely out of line. Now, the reality is this originated out of state and is being driven by forces out of state. So if you say it's not within our purview, well, when somebody takes the first swing at you, they should be expected to get punched back in the nose. And that's kind of what our council should be doing. So thank you very much.
Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Mayor. I had to do a little research on this, and what I came up with is a couple of authors here. One is from the Smart Capital Mind website. And what they describe it as the economic development and education are related by manner in which education leads to the ability of individuals to create opportunities for economic development. And if you get a chance, listen to the story about Thomas Edison when he was in school. There was, a short version is that he was really struggling at a hard time making it through school, and as you know, he wanted to be one of our greatest inventors in the history of mankind. And then another quote here is from Hannah Miller and Joseph Edward, and it has to do with municipal governments are a powerful force when it comes to the economic development. They bring in jobs and entrepreneurs, and then there's more to the story as well. I think it's very important that the public understands that the mayor of Rapid City brought back to the city of Rapid City something called Early Learning Rapid City. In that course, we were learning about how much money the city is spending on the people that are educationally challenged. It's a significant demographic within the city of Rapid City that we have to spend about $15 million on annually for their community needs. I think that's something to be aware of because of the challenges that our police and fire have to face with the people that they deal with almost on a daily basis, if not more frequently than that, is that we're spending $15 million annually. I've also started reading through all the standards. I haven't quite finished it, but the questions I keep coming up with is the background that I'm getting on the organization that put together these standards is a church organization or something affiliated with the church. So I have to ask the question about, if this is imposed upon us, shouldn't this be a separation of church and state? And then the other question I have here is that if a student doesn't pass in the elementary grades, is that a mark against that student? And hopefully one of the teachers will be able to share additional information on that. And then in high school, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Mr. Jones, is that if a student doesn't pass these courses, if it's imposed upon us, they do not graduate. So I will yield my time to Mr. Jones to allow for time to answer. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, Mr. Jones.
Thank you very much. In answer to your question, there are required social studies classes at the high school level. Currently, right now, Juniors are required to take a full year of United States history. Seniors are required to take a semester of U.S. government, and there are others. If they don't pass one of those, they have to retake it at some time along their high school career in order to graduate. If this curriculum were to be adopted, whatever classes that are within this curriculum were to be determined to be required at the high school level, then the answer to your question is yes. If they failed them, they would have to redo them in order to graduate, because the state of South Dakota requires certain numbers of credits in each content area, and there are required credits in social studies that have to be passed. So if some funky class were to be identified as required and a student didn't pass it, they would have to retake it either in summer school or in their course of study in order to graduate. Thank you.
Next is Laura Armstrong.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, last week at the Legal and Finance Committee, I spoke about recruitment, but I'm glad Mr. Pfeiffer spoke about retaining. We were also talking about our police officers, wellness and retaining them as well. And I think if we're going to emphasize and keeping police officers, we also have to put equal emphasis on our educators as well. I've spent the last couple of months in these conversation circles. The overwhelming majority of people are concerned about our schools, so we do have a due diligence to speak up. In some of those conversation circles, I'm finding out that student teachers that aren't even really in the profession as of yet, they're already burnt out. That's concerning. And then we also have that compounded with teachers, lifelong educators that are just fed up, and they're leaving the profession because of obstacles just like this. Again, the overwhelming majority of people paying attention are against these standards. We have students, the U City Council, educators, administrators, retired educators, the South Dakota Retired Educator Association, Elevate, business owners, attorneys, 22 other municipalities, hundreds of parents and grandparents, and once again, we have to acknowledge a unanimous decision by our Rapid City School Board. I think the number was 85%. So if we're not listening to all of these people, who are you listening to? That's the question I pose. I want to share just a quick story. I'm not afraid to admit when I'm wrong, and especially when I learn a lesson. Mayor, about 2 years ago, we invited the school board to come back into chambers. You remember that? So for anybody who does not know, both the schools and the city functioned in this building at one time. They moved to their own building at that time. About 2 years ago, a lot of contention, a lot of heated debate. People were showing up wearing guns. It was very contentious. And the mayor invited the school board back into these chambers. And I was not happy about it. I thought it was dangerous. I was very concerned. Had a borderline hissy fit about this behind closed doors. And Mayor, do you remember what you said to me? You said, we have an obligation to help them. They are a part of this community, and we need to be there for them. And of course I said, but it's separate. They have their own building. It's gonna muddy the waters. You said, this is what leaders do. So thank you for that lesson. So for any of you going down that rabbit hole saying that we shouldn't be doing this, listen to our mayor. Be a leader. Speak for the people that are against these standards. We need to support this resolution. And I'm going to conclude with one last thing. I often say that Rapid Creek is the lifeblood of our city. Well, I firmly believe that our schools are the heartbeat of this city. And that is why I'm in support of this resolution. Thank you.
Jesse Ham.
So I am a son of 2 lifelong educators. I'm an educator myself in my discipline. I'm a father of 4 kids who have gone through school, K through 5 in this school district. I'm fully aware for the entirety of my life the difficulties that teachers face and the challenges that have been discussed here. It wouldn't seem as though a lifelong physical therapist would have much to say about this concept, but all of the things that have been said, I agree with. And one of the things I spoke with Mr. Pfeiffer earlier about is that I think we do need to take the time to discuss this as a group, and I appreciate this discussion on multiple fronts. Looking into the details of how we address this, the best, and this isn't to speak for or against anyone. This is, I think, what we should do in reflection of Ms. Armstrong's sentiment here. I think we should mirror the school board's decision, and that is to propose a resolution in favor of consolidation of the social studies standards. That was their dialogue, and I think that we should support that notion. So it may change the wording of what we say here, but I think we'd be in favor of consolidation of the social studies standards. I yield.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to take just a minute and ask our council president to time me so I don't run over time. I just have a couple of comments about this. I've read through the standards. I really didn't read past the 6th grade because I couldn't understand any of the words. That's a slight exaggeration, but not very much. I can't understand why the content of these standards is so massive. And I know teachers, and they teach in their classrooms, and I can tell you this in confidence, they don't have 5 extra minutes in a day, let alone the 5 hours or so that they would need to pound this curriculum home with all of these hyperactive, immature thinking human beings who are mostly worried about what's happening at recess. This is an area where there are only certain qualified people in this community and in this state, and we are not one of them. It's the teachers. These standards, I disagree with the proposed standards, but not for some of the reasons others do. I do think they're too hard. I do think they're unrealistic. I think they're about politics and not about education. And, it's been brought up that maybe this isn't a city issue, and I can get on board with that, but it's at least as much of a city issue as gold mining is, and other things that may affect our community that we live in. Teachers are our constituents, and they are constituents that have more influence over the future Rapid City than any of us will ever have. But these standards are unrealistic, and here's why I'm opposed to them. First of all, there's no time for the teachers to implement this. So if this passes at the state level and now these teachers get a whole new load that they're expected to take care of, they're not going to do it. Number one, because they don't have time, and because number two, social studies is not one of those subjects that is measured by the standardized testing. So when it comes time for their evaluation or whatever, the teacher will just say, oh yeah, we talked about it. But I don't believe we're going to find it on the final tests, and no 3rd grader is going to get up and give a dissertation on the Peloponnesian War, which is in the curriculum. I said I don't think these standards are about education, but I think maybe they are, because I think they're about division, but not the kind of division that you learn in school. It's about the kind of division that politics brings into communities. I think this is a solution to the perceived, real or imagined problem of teachers filling our kids' brains full of liberal ideas. And the reaction of the far right in this case is to overcompensate with a bunch of standards taken from a Christian conservative university and try to counter all of these beliefs. All of this being done without coming into our classrooms and our communities to see what's being taught, without asking the thousands of professionals across this state what these students need. And by the way, when I went to school, it was different. Sounds like an old man story, and it kind of is. It was different because my teachers were not required to help raise me. They taught me, they gave me my D or whatever I deserved for goofing off, and I had to take that home and explain it to my parents. My parents never felt it was the teacher's problem. So things have changed, and I'm afraid our teachers were asking so much of them, but you know, when they start out, teachers start out when? Mrs. Robinson, when did you decide you were going to be a teacher? When you were a little girl? Yeah, I've heard it 100 times. They want to be a teacher from the time they're a little girl. And they end up taking that job anyway when they learn in today's money they're going to make about $40,000 a year to take care of other kids, other people's kids all day long, and then go home and grade their papers and pay their own money for school supplies. It's unfair to exclude them from this conversation, and I find it inappropriate and offensive. So I just wanted to get that off my chest. Thank you. I see there are no other requests for comment. So on this issue, item 40, the resolution about the current standards, we'll go to a vote. All in favor of the approval of the resolution, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. Let's have a quick roll call then.
Jones.
Yes.
Lehman.
No.
Solomon.
No.
Evans.
Yes.
Roseland.
Yes.
Nordstrom.
Yes.
Ham.
No.
Roberts.
No.
Stroman.
No.
Armstrong.
Yes.
Tie vote 5-5.
Okay, chair votes aye. Thank you, everyone, for participating, for showing up at the meeting tonight. Okay, moving on with the agenda. Public hearing items 41 through 43. There are no speaker requests on these items. So we'll go to consent public hearing items 41 through 43. Would the council have a motion? Motion approved by Roberts, second by Mr. Jones. All in favor of consent public hearing items 41 through 43, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Down to non-consent public hearing items, item 44. Second reading of ordinance number 6561, an ordinance amendment to amend sections 17.12.050 and 17.12.070 and 17.40.050 of the Rapid City Municipal Code relating to the height of certain structures. Motion to approve Nordstrom, second Roberts. All in favor of approval say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 45 is the bill list, and so we'll go to our interim finance director, Tracy Davis. Oh, wait. Okay.
There are no changes to the bill list, so the total is $7,910,686.45.
Motion to approve Solomon, second Lehman. All in favor of approval say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion to adjourn, anyone? Okay, Nordstrom, Lehman, Ham, Roberts, everyone else? Solomon, second by everyone, and we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
You know, I gotta tell